We all know that Silk Route connected India and China. Some scholars even say that Silk Route is a misnomer. There was no silk traveling along this route, and they want to call it a sutra route because more sutras, more Sanskrit literature is there that traveled along this route. So what we are going to talk about today is about the small kingdoms situated along the Silk Route. Silk Route, as we know, that the vast, it's around the vast expanses of deserts, just a few rivers coming down from the mountain ranges. It runs through the vast deserts of like Taklamakan, Lop and Gobi. When I was traveling, the route is, even now, it's too dry. And sometimes it happened in our journey of around 3 weeks. It happened 2-3 times that we had to travel 800 kilometers in a day because there was nothing on the route, not even a tea shop, no water, nothing. So I used to think, today we are traveling by air-conditioned cars and staying in hotels and having guides and all these things. And after that we say, oh, it was a very difficult journey. What were these monks were doing, traveling along? So much passion they had for Buddhist scriptures, for Indian, the knowledge that India had at that time. So this route is... It's not a road. It's called route because there are so many roads connecting small places on this route. In between, we have a huge desert, and so the main route that I'm going to talk about is from Kashgar to Dunhuang. Kashgar to Dunhuang. This is what I'm going to talk about today. It bifurcates at Kashgar. Kashgar, even today in the modern Chinese maps, is called Kashi. And it was a center of Vedic studies because there is just one reference in history that Kumarajiva came from Kucha to Kashgar to study Vedas. Otherwise, we don't have any references that it was a center of Hindu scriptures also. So what I'm going to talk about is the northern route, and again it meets at Dunhuang. And here is the southern route. So all the small kingdoms that were situated along this route, northern and southern Silk Route. The northern route goes via Samarkand, Kashgar, then meets at Kashgar, and then Tumshuk, Aksu, Kucha, Karashahar, Turfan and Hami. And the southern route goes via Yarkand, Khotan, Cheria, Cherchen and Miran. These are the major small kingdoms that were there. Chinese and Indian scholars traveled through these routes in search of these texts, and they were great centers of Buddhism from many places. Although these are all destroyed now by Islamic invaders, all the monasteries are ruined. All the literature, all the art forms, everything was destroyed, but still whatever is there discovered, so we are going to talk about it. Why it could be saved? Because it is desert, so there was no because things get decomposed soon in our climate, which is hot and damp. But there it could, because of being dry. So what expeditions went there, who were the people who went there, who excavated, and what do we find, and in which collections are these things today. So there were in the monasteries there were huge collections of manuscripts. The most important is the Sanskrit manuscripts that are discovered. There are a number of Sanskrit manuscripts which are lost forever in India, but are found during excavations and are there in many collections in different countries. The art of painting, whatever we find in the caves, I'll show you some examples. Then sculptures. Most of the sculptures are destroyed, but still there are some that are taken by Europeans, mostly Europeans, and we can have some idea about the architecture of monasteries there, temples, and dance, drama, music, languages, literature, scripts, and calligraphy, etc. How principles of art, shadanga, that are used in there, what kind of rituals and ceremonies were there, who has referred to it. So the pilgrims I talked about, the Chinese pilgrims who have written about written their travelogues, they have mentioned that what did they see on their way. So they talk about all these places. Jyotish was popular, Ayurveda, chemistry, metallurgy. There were many things that are found because we find is manuscripts from there. The manuscripts are mostly fragmented. Just a few are in a good condition. Only Lotus Sutra, for example, is complete Lotus Sutra, almost complete Lotus Sutra has been discovered. Because when people started going there, excavating and collecting things, then the people in those villages, they realized, oh, there is something important. So they sold page by page, page by page to make money. So there are, for example, the manuscripts are fragmented because of two reasons. One, after the destruction of the monasteries, and the second is because they intentionally did it to make more money. So there are scholars in Europe who are working on them. For example, there is one scholar, Seishi Karashima in Japan. He could find, because he's working so seriously on the Sanskrit manuscripts, that he found one piece in Russia, in St. Petersburg, and the other piece in Germany, of the same page. He could found, oh, this is torn here and this piece is there and that piece is there. So people are working very seriously in many countries. In India, we don't have much awareness about it. So these, yeah,
what period of time are you?
First millennia, first century, to first century, yeah, almost. Because in 67 there are two monks I talked about. Because according to earlier researches, they were called Indian monks, Kashyap, Matang and Dharmraksha, about whom there is an inscription in China, in the Loang monastery, and they say that they were from Central Asia. They were not exactly from India, they were UHs. So in my earlier talk, I talked about them. So they were UHs. So that is why we are very sure about it, that we begin this history from first century or even before that.
But this is accepted?
Yeah, this is accepted.
It is
Because
accepted by the, what do you call, some eminent people?
Eminent, all people, all historians, all these people who are working on this area, they accept it. Because on the basis of script, they can identify, and on the basis of language, things are identified. And sometimes when Chinese are working, they give precise date, day, who was the ruling emperor. They all give all the details. So in the inscription that I'm talking about of the 67 AD, I have myself worked on it. So Dr. Raghuvira had brought a stampage of that, and it's very precisely written, everything, all the details. So it's all accepted. So all these small kingdoms, they were halting places for the monks and also for the traders, because after all it was a trade route, from China to Rome and to coming to India, and people were going from the marine route also, and this also. So we were having trade exchanges also. One talk I am planning to give on trade relations also, so that we can connect different things, because monks were coming also with the traders. There are some stories about the monks, that who were the monks, who went with whom did they go, and because they used to take monks so that they could chant on the way, they could perform some rituals for a safe journey and so on. So these were flourishing centers, because people there knew Sanskrit, They were teaching, these monasteries in these places were teaching Sanskrit also, and people coming from China, first they did not come directly to India. First they used to go to Khotan. When we talk about the Chinese monks coming to India, so they started with Khotan. Khotan was a great center of Sanskrit. So they were translating also there, because people from China were coming and also from India they were going. And it started with Ashoka. People come, as we were just before starting this talk, we were talking about Ashoka. Why Buddhism became so strongly, deeply rooted in these countries? Because Ashoka has sent a mission even to Khotan. He had sent a governor also. One of his sons had also gone there. So it's so. Uh, all the eminent scholars, Buddhist scholars, their texts were translated, like Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Sangha, etc. And I have already talked about the Indian monks and the Chinese monks and which texts were they bringing. So we find an incalculable treasure of Sanskrit text that was buried under that, and after the devastation of the monasteries. So great adventurers, archaeologists and explorers began digging the deserted and devastated countries. Glorious sites enlivened by the activities of Buddhist communities. Numerous cave temples and monasteries are discovered. I have been to a few. For example, Kizil. I will show you some photos from Kizil, because Kizil, although it's much destroyed, but still so much is left there to study. And whatever has been taken by German, for example, explorers, they have kept it very well, very well. I was so surprised when I was in Berlin, Academy of Sciences, the collection from these monasteries, the tiny fragments of these manuscripts are cleaned so well, then kept between two pieces of glass so that they don't deteriorate further. And people are not allowed to enter without permission, and very carefully they are working. And if you try to search on the net, you will find so many thousands of things about these fragments. So it actually, all these fragments that we find in these collections, we just try to recover a lost page of Indian history, because we haven't written much. I don't think we have written much about these exchanges, that who were the people going from India, who were the people coming from these countries, and what were they doing, and all these things. We don't get these details. So we have to rely on Chinese sources. So I just wanted to tell you about how this discovery of Sanskrit manuscripts began. And there was a lieutenant, his name was Bala. He discovered the first Sanskrit manuscript from the Silk Road. He had gone to Kucha on a confidential mission sent by the government, British government of the time, 1890. He was searching a murderer, and he found a 5th century medical manuscript written on a birch bark in Sanskrit. And the discoveries was very sudden. It was just amazing for the scholars, that for the administrators that time, that he just opened there was a gate, and when he opened it, there was a cow standing, and as soon as he opened the gate, it fell down, and from her stomach came out, he could find that this manuscript of Ayurveda and some other manuscripts. So it was a very amazing discovery. So on his return, he took the manuscripts to Shimla, and then he wrote to the Asiatic Society in Bengal. The first decipherment of the manuscript was published in its proceedings, and then people started. The whole modern movement of this archaeological explorations in Central Asia starts from this Bhavan manuscript. And then there was another scholar, his name is Professor Buller, who announced the discovery as an issue in the Vienna General and all these things. So people came to know about in Petrovsky, in Russia also. So they said, the Russian Archaeological Society, they sent a mission to Kashgar. Then they started working on it, that yes, we can find things from also explorer, archaeologists, they started searching. So the Petrovsky's collection, they went there, people went there and brought a number of manuscripts. And then the British, from British India also, there is another collection, Hornell collection. He was a scholar of, he worked on Indo-Aryan languages. Then Orelstein went. This collection of Orelstein was divided into two parts after independence. Half went to London and half remained in our National Museum. So it's still there, but people are not much aware of that wonderful collection, and it's historically so important. For example, I'll show you some legal documents written in Prakrit Sanskrit, because I would say that it was a spoken Sanskrit of that time. In India, we haven't discovered any manuscripts, any records, any archival these things from documents from about that. Sanskrit ever was a language of administration and writing legal documents. But I'll show you that from Kizil and other places. So in National Museum also we have them, but we do not know about it. And so much is fading, and it's already faded, and now they are doing some work, but still Kharoshthi, for example, in India, there is not a single expert of Kharoshthi. They are there in Europe, they're in China, in Japan, but I don't know why, but they are not given permissions to work on those manuscripts. So Petrovsky, I'll give you the exact dates. Petrovsky collection is, they all went around late 19th century. Late 19th century. Buller's article was published in 1891, it is. So it's early 20th century, you can say. Late 19th, yeah.
My request is that I think we discussed earlier also.
Yeah.
If in the course, and I have my colleagues in Central Asia,
Yeah.
and Jyoti and Pravesh,
Yeah.
help us draw the northern trail. I saw in Bukhara, on madrasas,
Okay.
sign of Varaha boar, which is very unusual in an Islamic monument. There was it. So obviously it goes back to Buddhist and before Buddhist, the Sanskrit period.
Yeah.
And sun, which is again a typical Hindu motif.
Yes, absolutely.
Now that connection is completely lost.
Yeah.
And I believe that this Maulana Azad Institute in Calcutta has done some work, but I think this is something which VIF would like to do. And my two colleagues who are sitting here, so we would like to benefit from your expertise.
Yeah.
Bukhara, I was told, comes from Vara.
Yeah, Vara.
This is, the official Uzbek
Yeah.
interpretation.
Even for Iran, they say it was Aryanam. They had a general Aryana. Their airlines also. So Aryan, the word is there. People have to work on it, that how many Sanskrit words are there in the Iranian language, and what are the concepts there that are still existing in all this. For example, you talked about sun, because we always worshipped sun and moon as symbols of eternity. We have the Suryavanshi and Chandravanshi. So it's a long history. It continues even today, but we do not connect these things.
Tehran, I was told he was one of the richest men, he's still there in Iran. He said his father told him that there were two villages on Iran's Caspian Sea shore where people only spoke Sanskrit.
Okay.
And this fellow is my generation, so his father was just a generation ago.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Now, that thread is lost. Now, in the southern part of Iran, that there were number of villages where Sanskrit was understood. And Armenia, there's this famous Shiva temple, which was part of, I think, some sort of pilgrimage route where you have the swastika and the shivling and all those. So that entire belt, what we should try and do.
Yes.
We can revive this ancient route, which both the cultural dimension and the historical dimension.
Yes, working on linguistics also is very important and very interesting also. For example, the Black Sea in Russian is called Krishnadar.
Krishnadar.
Krishnadar. Krishnadar. So Krishna is from Krishna, Kala, black, and then Dar, for example, is for water body, Darya.
In Iran, again, northern part, there are two towns, Naramsar and Garamsar.
Okay.
Naramsar was actually visited by Tagore twice. And Persian, modern Persian has words like Sogand with the same meaning, which we do not use in colloquial Hindi, but they use in colloquial Farsi even today. Charm is again very common, used colloquially. And of course, I think I mentioned that Iranian foreign minister told me that the root of Farsi is Sanskrit, because till Middle Persian, that is Pahlavi, was very close to Avesta, Zoroastrian language, which was 80% common with Sanskrit.
Even Pashto, I have an article.
Sorry for interruption.
Yeah, I have an article written by Dr. Rugvira about Sanskrit element in Pashto. Maybe I can share with you. So there were expeditions were going on from all these countries. Swedish explorers went heading. Because they were being inspired by one after the other. So Orelstein, he has inspired many. So one of them was Sven Hedin, and the basic cliff caves were first explored by Leacock from Germany in 1905, representative from Baron Otani from Japan. They went on exploration in 1808 and 9 sometime. So there was one collection brought by the Germans from Basic Lake, and because what they did is they scrapped the whole paintings from the walls and took them. So there was a very good collection, but it is lost. Nobody knows where is that. And after the Second World War, there was so much confusion. So far it is not located, and people say they were not destroyed also, because where the place where they were kept was not destroyed. So who owns them? Nobody knows. So the discoveries from Central Asia were always so exciting, and they started piecing together, as I told you, about one of the Sanskrit manuscripts done by the modern Sanskrit scholar in Japan. And people started writing about it. Professor Sylvain Levy is a big name in this area. He wrote that Mother of wisdom, India gave mythology to her neighbors. Mother of law and philosophy, she gave to 3/4 of Asia a god, a religion, a doctrine, and art. The Sanskrit is esteemed as a treasure of high order, eternal, life-giving, and ever fresh. So I would like to talk about a few of these small kingdoms that flourished at the time. As I talked about, I showed you Kashi, from where the road bifurcates. It is written that there were 350,000 residents in the western part of this region. Xuanzang passed through Kashgar, which he refers to as Kashi, in 644 on his return journey from India to China. The Buddhist religion, then beginning to decay in India, was active in Kashgar. He said that they had abundant crops, fruits, flowers, wove fine woolen stuffs and rugs, their writing had been copied from India, but their language was different from that of the other countries. The inhabitants were very sincere believers of Buddhism, and he shares there was some hundreds of monasteries with more than 10,000 followers, and all of them were members of Sarvastivada. When we talk about rugs, na, this woolen, fine woolen stuff and rugs, there is a discovery of the story of Krishna, because rugs were not only used as carpets, they were used as decorations also. So there is a beautiful decoration. Sorry, I don't have the colored photograph. I just saw it in a research paper, that how story of Krishna is woven into that. And just something was coming to my mind. Yeah, today it was a very strong center of learning, not only Buddhist but also Vedic studies. But today I was so shocked when I reached Kashi, that as you enter Kashi, you can see just shops full of knives, from the smallest to the biggest. So many shops just selling knives. I asked them, who buys all these things? Something is definitely there is something is happening like this. Then Kucha, where Kumarajiva was born, I talked about Kucha in my earlier talk. So it is situated on the banks of Kucha Darya. To its northeast is Simsim. Okay. To its northeast is Simsim, and on the two sides in the south of Simsim are other rivers. There is another beautiful site that is called Subashi. Subashi is almost destroyed. We went to Subashi also. It's the birthplace of Kumarajiva. It was an outstanding center of artistic and architectural importance. Wall paintings depicted a variety of Buddhist subjects. From when you look at the earlier part of this, you will see a very simple philosophy, starting from the Jatakas. Kucha was a leading center on the northern route, corresponding to Khotan on the southern part. Its kings bore Sanskrit names like Hari Pushpa, Suvarna Pushpa, Haradeva, Suvarna Deva. Now, what we have to do is that we have to study these names, that what kind of names were used in India at that time, what titles our kings were taking, what kind of local literature was prevalent there. Although it's very difficult task. Again, we have to study the Sanskrit or the other manuscripts, whatever has been discovered from this Kucha area. Sanskrit was methodically taught in the monasteries of Kucha. The kingdom of Kucha, they have said that there were 1,000 Buddhist monasteries and temples and numerous monasteries and nunneries in the 4th century. Again, Xuanzang has mentioned that there were 5,000 monks in the 100 monasteries. It's not a big number. The figures found from Kucha region were full of soft and sensual elegance and all these things. We work on these things when we work on history of art. So remarkable number of wooden sculptures are also discovered from Kucha, and there is another site, Tumshuk, near it. I didn't go to Tumshuk, I went up to Kucha. So then we come to, I would like to talk about Kizil a little bit. Yeah, you can see this is the photograph here. It's taken by me. So just recent, how difficult it would have been to travel in this route. It is so dry. You can just see only desert. It's only sand everywhere. So, yeah, this is one of the oldest fragments of a drama. Its name is Shariputra Prakaran. It's written by Ashwaghosha of the Kushan period, 2nd century AD. It's discovered from Kizil. From India, we haven't discovered any such thing from this period. Till a few decades ago, people, the scholars all over the world had agreed that there is a Sanskrit manuscript preserved in the Horyuji monastery, which was taken for chanting when the first constitution of Japan was promulgated. So that is around 6th, 7th century, Ushnish Vijaya Dharani manuscript. The scholars had agreed that this is the earliest Sanskrit manuscript. But now, after the discovery of these manuscripts from Silk Route, now this is the earliest manuscript, Sanskrit manuscript. 2nd century. So they also they have discovered some fragments of Shakuntal, Abhigyan Shakuntal, another drama by Kalidasa, and a small biography of Kalidasa is also discovered from Silk Route, which we have not found from India. And that old manuscript of Shariputra Prakaran or Abhigyan Shakuntal we haven't found from India. That means because there are so many dramas they were taking from here and they were translating them, and they developed their own style of drama, dance and music on the basis of Indian dance and drama and music. There are researches about it. So Kizil, and also there is something very interesting when I went to Kizil. There is a huge number of caves. I think I should show you some. Yeah, here you can see Kizil. All these holes, they are all caves, and in front is the statue of Kumarajiva. Kumarajiva, he used to go and meditate there in the Kizil caves. Inside the caves, they are so beautifully decorated, although a lot has been destroyed. One thing I found in common in all the caves was very surprising, that when you enter a cave, what you see inside is at the center originally there was a huge statue or a group of statues. What was there, it's not known because it's all destroyed. And behind that, in all the caves there is a sleeping Buddha, Parinirvan Buddha, just like this. So I asked them, the archaeologists, the Chinese archaeologists were accompanying, and they were just showing the caves, and they were so happy that there is somebody from India who is studying the caves. And because only when we compare these paintings on the walls of these caves, if we compare them with Sanskrit literary sources, only then we can know what is this. Otherwise, all these Europeans, when they don't consult Sanskrit texts, then they say this is there, but why? They don't have an answer. Similarly, in Dunhuang, there are thousands and thousands of mural paintings, but why this thing is there? Why there is a bird flying there? Why there is a pond here? Why these people sitting on lotus flower in the pond are there? Why people are dancing and playing on musical instruments, etc.? So they don't have answer for it. So when I did some studies about this, comparing them with our philosophy and talking about yoga and how we were meditating and why they were made for meditation, so things become very clear. So in these caves, when we entered one after the other, we could go to a few caves, and they were so happy, and they said there are a few caves which we never show to any foreigner. You are the first foreigner, you can see this. Even the Berlin people from Museum for Asiatic Kunst, they went there, and even they were not shown. So some of the caves you can't reach them, you can see, but some you can enter. So when I saw that sleeping Buddha in most of the caves, then I tried to find out that does the backside of that altar where the statues were originally, is there any space for putting up, keeping some box like thing? So I tried one, then I tried another cave, then another cave, and yes, there were something like holes, so space I could see that was used for keeping the relics of somebody who has died. This was just my impression, that these caves were because everything happened because of a reason, and mostly they were political. Mostly these were done by the orders of the ruling families, or something like this was happening. So it has to be researched. But when I said that What I feel is because what I tried to look at and analyze the paintings on the back behind the Buddha, sleeping Buddha, and there were all the entire walls are still the paintings are still preserved to some extent because they could not be destroyed. There were too many. So, and my feeling was that these caves are dug one after the other for maybe for the imperial family, members of the imperial family to keep the relics. And I could be sure because I could find that space for keeping the box full of relics. And the sleeping Buddha means he represents the parinirvan of a person. So, analysis of those paintings are very interesting. Maybe somebody can do it. Parinirvan, death of Buddha. So, passing away of Buddha. So, because they don't say Buddha died, so he just passed away to another world. Although people say, Buddhists say we don't believe in soul, but still they do, that the soul has transmigrated to Sukhavati, and there are so many heavens, and if there are heavens and there are people shown in the heavens, that means they believe in soul. They believe in rebirth, although they don't accept it. But we have proofs for that. So, Kizil is another very important. Yeah, I just wanted to show you. Yeah, this is a mural painting from Kizil, and here you can see that there is a goddess of music here, and it's from 171 number cave. Probably it depicts the story of the Buddha and the goddess of music. When Buddha disguised himself as a musician, music had gone from India and it had gone from there to China. Why we are talking about Silk Route is because most of the things, not all, but most of the things traveled from India via Silk Route. So what we find in Silk Route is it was later developed and it flourished in China and then to Korea, and then from there and then it goes to Japan also. First it was by Korea and then they had direct relations, and things went from China to Japan. So all the flying figures, for example, I'm sorry I didn't bring the flying figures here. There are some more things. Yeah, you can see how beautifully these Kizil caves are decorated. Mostly in Kizil, it was, people say that on the basis of the discovered manuscripts and also on the basis of these beautiful paintings, murals, that this Mahayana Buddhism was flourishing there. There were both sects of Buddhism flourishing on the Silk Route. Hinian, we don't want to say Hinian, the people don't like this term. It's better to call it Theravada. Theravada Buddhism. Actually, Mahayana was not a word anywhere. People misunderstood. According to one researcher, the term was Mahajnana. Mahajnana became later on, people took it as distorted as Mahayana, and when there is something Mahayana, then there has to be a Hinian also. So later tradition added this. These terms were later coined by the people. So they are wrong terms actually, but now there are so popular Mahayana and Hinian and Theravada and Vajrayana. So, but they were Jnan actually. In how there are some scholars who say that these Sanskrit manuscripts of Mahayana, actually some of them were written first in Pali and later they were written in Sanskrit. So people have their different opinions on the basis of their research. And so beautiful life-size images were there in the Kizil caves. There is another site that is called Kumtura. Kumtura is a small locality to the west of Kucha. The extensive complex of cave temples in Kumtura lie in the broad valley. It's deep ravines cut into the mountains, and Kumtura is beautiful because now still there are many paintings on the walls. People study about how these paintings, the styles in the paintings in Kumtura and Kizil, how they had impact on the Chinese painting styles. Actually, there are many styles that have gone from India to China, and there were many ways of going. For example, there was one scholar, Xuanze. He was sent by a Chinese emperor. He sent a mission to copy all the paintings of Indian cave complexes, and he made copies, and but unfortunately he died here. But the Chinese emperor was so curious about for all these copies that he sent another mission to take them to China. So that is why we have a direct influence from our caves to Chinese caves, painting style, and also this sculpture style of sculpture. So there is another site near Kucha, because Kucha was a very flourishing kingdom. So in and around Kucha there were many monasteries. Another this site is Karashahar. So Karashahar was a leading center of propagating Buddhism, and it sent many things from Karashahar and Kucha. They sent many things from their own places, their own kingdoms to China also. There were direct connections. So the nearby cave temples house extremely interesting illustrated manuscripts are also found. There were huge collections. I was reading a book on Central Asia written by the Germans. They went there. There was an expedition going there, and they have written that when they reached there, people were so sad. They said, "Oh, you are so late to come here. Just a few days ago, 2 truckloads of manuscripts were thrown into the river." So many sculptures destroyed and broken, and then they were thrown into the rivers. There were people there are 2 rivers flowing there, Karakash and Yurunkash. People used to sit, poor people in villages, they used to sit with sieves to collect gold. Too much of gold was flowing in these rivers. So one can see, even now we can see so many just all broken pieces. But now China is working very hard to protect these things, and the way they are protecting is also amazing. Amazing. I went to one site, the whole site was covered. It's so difficult to cover such a huge site. And they are working with collecting all the tiny pieces of these sculptures and paintings and other things, and piecing together. There is another site, Turfan. Turfan is still, there is a lot in Turfan, although so much has been ruined by the invaders and also because of nature. But still there is a lot that people are working on. I have seen I have some Japanese friends who have been associated to this, because it's very difficult to get permission in China to work on for a foreigner to work on them. So there's a Japanese team who is working, and the way they are working so much, it's brilliant. If you look at them, you'll say, "Oh, what is this? There's nothing. I can't see anything." But the way they are making drawings, they are making out which story is there. There's a German scholar. Her name is Monika Zinn, and the way she has been working still, and what she has identified. For example, Vidushak on the wall paintings. Because there are dramas there are stories there painted on these walls. So she has in one paper she has identified Vidushak in these paintings. So sometimes you can see Brahmanas. Maybe I have that Brahmana. Yeah, you see. There are Brahmanas. Brahmanas in all these places were highly regarded. And you can see this is one Brahmana from a cave from Kumtara, and you can see how it is damaged also. It is so difficult to identify and preserve these things. And I could see something very similar, the same features in some painting, in some stone sculpture in Afghanistan. Maybe nobody has identified who that teacher is, but he should have been very famous because his portrait you can see. So there is another place which is called Bezeklik. Bezeklik is also full of paintings, and when I went to Bezeklik, I was so sad to see that how people, because people, it is written by German scholars, German archaeologists, that people in the villages were told that if you don't destroy these, all those who are painted on the walls, they will destroy you and your crops both. So बच्चा बच्चा जिसे कहते हैं ना, they went with knives to kill them, to so you can see signs of knives on the, especially on the faces and in the eyes. How they destroyed it. Very sad. And a huge collection for basically is lost. There are more than 80 caves that are that still survive. And many Germans, they took off paintings from Basic Lake, and they have kept it well. And the best paintings date from the 9th to the 13th centuries from Basic Lake. And if I wanted to show you one painting from Basic Lake. Yeah, this is from Basic Lake. And on the top, you can see there is an inscription. According to the inscription, it is a donation by a king. And it is written that he donated a chhatra and a danda, means he donated some gold bar for the monastery and also an umbrella, and he sponsored these paintings. So these paintings are still there. This is my own picture from basically. So by 10th century, the area from Gansu province to Khotan was controlled by Uyghurs. Uyghurs did a lot for spreading Sanskrit, for translating Sanskrit texts, and also building and painting these. Basically flourished as a center for Buddhist learning. Silk Road brought many good wealth, you can say, to its rulers. The murals celebrate cultural and economic riches of this period. Some of such murals were painted in 7th, 8th century. You can see that how Tribhang is there. You can see how what Indianness is there in such paintings. The way Buddha is sitting, the way he's on the side. Can you see this? One of the disciples of Buddha, and there you can see the Bodhisattva sitting there, and here is the donor. So the number of large paintings that were taken to Berlin by the Germans and kept at the ethnological museums by Van Leeuwenhoek, they were lost, as I said earlier, during the Second World War. Other pieces may have followed. They are there in the museums. And in Berlin, in the Museum for Asiatic Sequence, they have made a beautiful cave, recreated a cave to show such things. That is amazing. So there are many sites. I think I can just skip some of them. Tumshuk and Sengin and Kocho and Danda. Danda, no, look, yeah, it was Khotan also.
All in China?
Yeah, now it's Xinjiang region of China. It's all Xinjiang. Khotan played a great role in our relations between the two countries. The history of Khotan goes back to almost more than 2,000 years, because it begins with Ashoka, as I said. One of Ashoka's son had gone there, and Ashoka had sent a governor also. And there is history about it, and how monasteries were built there in Khotan. There is a Tibetan document that talks about monasteries, because it's all ruined, so it's very difficult to study these things. There is a Tibetan text that talks about the monasteries built in Khotan, and it's very surprising. The names of the kings, they start with Vijaya. So it was a Vijaya dynasty that was ruling in Khotan. Jade, Khotan was known for jade, and China was importing jade from Khotan. Khotan played this jade played an important role in trade relations, and it was also becoming affluent because of jade, and it was because of that they could build so huge Buddhist monasteries, and they were sponsoring projects of translating Sanskrit texts, etc. And also silk industry flourished. Even now in Khotan, when we went there are so much of mulberry trees. Nobody is there to manufacture silk, because it takes too much time, and now nobody wants to pay so much. Now the things are becoming so expensive, but still there is so much that can be done in to manufacture silk there, and dance, music, and commercial activities, and also they had gold also. According to some Chinese records written, for example, Xuanzang, he himself was there, and there are two of his peoples who have written his biography. They have written that the kingdom was founded by one of the kings of Ashoka. His name was Sanu, and his minister in the 3rd century BC. This is written by a disciple of Xuanzang. Xuanzang account of this, there is a text that is called Goshringa Vyakaran, and prophecy of the Li country. This is Tibetan actually. So this is what I said, that it has the name of Vijaya dynasty kings. I have a long list of this. So Khotan flourished uninterruptedly for more than 13 centuries. Only after when it was invaded, then it was ruined, and now what you find in Khotan is almost nothing. There was another, there's another, now we call them sites, although they were flourishing empires, Dandanoluk. It also had many Buddhist monasteries. They are all now destroyed. Some manuscripts and coins are very important that are discovered from the 7th, 8th century, and also sculptures in wood, clay, and all these things. Another site that Orelstein also went there. Orelstein had done a lot of work on Khotan. He brought a lot of things from Khotan, and he wrote the most important books written by Orelstein are on Khotan. He wrote Ancient Khotan. It's a huge, thick book. Has given a lot of information, and that collection is there that I said in the National Museum, half of it. So I think we must put some pressure on the people there. I don't know how we can do it, but the manuscripts that are Kharoshti in India, nobody is going to work on them ever. Because we don't have these subjects, we don't learn them. We don't study this. So either we associate with some foreign scholar, or maybe VIF can play a role in this, that the things which we are never going to work on, at least they should be permitted. And I can introduce you the scholars who can work on it. If you want Chinese or you want Japanese, we'll see, or the Europeans, we'll see who can work on it. When I was in China, I was traveling along the Silk Road. Then I met an expert of Kharoshti, and he was very keen, and he asked me, he requested a lot that if he could get permission to work on it. So maybe they can give us digital copies, and somebody can be requested to work. So there is a lot to talk about. I don't know how much time have I taken. Do I still have time? So I would like to show you a few things. This is one of the manuscripts discovered from this Central Asia. It's a bilingual text. It's very interesting to talk about this, that it starts with, it's a conversation between two monks. The first thing they ask each other is, Kushala Swasti, Are you okay? Are you fine? Then he starts, then he asks, from where have you come? Kashmir deshe agata. Although Sanskrit is sometimes not grammatically right, but we highly appreciate it because Sanskrit was a spoken language at that time. It was a language of the people. Yeah. So, you see, this manuscript, then he asks about Kashmir. He says, Kashmir deshe agata. So he has come from Kashmir because Kashmir, you know, was a great center of learning. Then he asks him, have you fixed up an appointment with the emperor? And then he asks him about the text that he has brought. Have you brought this text? Have you brought that text? Then he asks about Manjushri. For example, we in India have 4 dham, 4 dham. So they also have they have their own places of pilgrimage. There are 4, and one of them is dedicated to Manjushri. And he asks, have you been to Manjushri monastery, the temples there? Now there are more than 100 temples in that area, on that mountain. So there are actually 4 mountains. We had places of pilgrimage on the mountains. Normally you will say that we have to climb a lot. It's very, now people are working from the scientific aspect also, that why one had to walk so hard and high, and that the journey is normally so difficult, and only then you say ki ab punya, more you get troubled, more difficult the journey is, more punya you have. So now people are working from the scientific point of view. For example, Sadhguru, if you have been to the ashram of Isha Foundation, Isha Center in Coimbatore, I recently went there a few months back. So I was so surprised to see how Sadhguru has designed these things so scientifically, that how you have acupressure, you get your body acupressured through walking on the stones, and how you get energy, and once the whole energy is you are out of most of your physical energy. Then if you reach a place of pilgrimage and it's full of energy, then you get more that divine energy and all these things. So people are working on them. So it's a different story.
That script is what?
It's Kharoshti. Khotanese. So in India, nobody studies Khotanese. Nobody studies, the language is Khotanese. So nobody studies. Kharoshti is their script that was, I can show you. It's the name. Ashokan's pillars are also there. Some, yeah. In Kharoshti. So it's interesting to study these things. For example, today we go to Japan or China, we don't know this language, but still you carry a small help book, like kind of a guidebook, like kind of a booklet with 100 sentences or so that you can converse. So it is a document that Sanskrit was an international language. It was a lingua franca of that time. People who were traveling abroad, they studied Sanskrit. The most important question that we have to think about is that how these Indian monks, Indian scholars who were going to China, did they know Sanskrit? Did they know Chinese? No. They learned, some of them, yes. For example, with Tibet, people living in Kashmir had very good relations because of traders. People were trading with Tibetan, different areas in Tibet, and they were learning Tibetan language because of trade. So there were people. But for China, I don't think there were any such thing. Maybe people were studying Chinese, but I don't think from Gandhar there is one again from this Central Asia. There is one manuscript discovered. It's the name of the text. The name of the you can say the text is Kalpana Manditika, and in Kalpana Manditika there are 90 stories. Very important stories from our point of history. Maybe again somebody here can work on it, but it's again the text is so fragmentary. But there is a complete text translation in Chinese, and that has been translated into German. So one has to know Sanskrit, Chinese and German. to work on that text. And there are stories about Kanishka, there is some stories about Ashoka, there are stories about Buddhism at that time, many things. And one thing I found very interesting is that there is a story of a trader going from Gandhar to China. We don't find much references about it, that how our traders were going there. So it's Sanskrit text which says, gives a story about people going from Gandhara for trade to China. Although it is again we have to rely on Chinese sources, that traders were living, had migrated from different parts to Dunhuang. In my earlier talk, I talked about it, that how traders were the first to take Buddhism, and in later generations of these families, people didn't know about Buddhism, so they wanted to learn, and that is how they started translating these texts. So, let me show you a few more things. This is one of the dharani from old Turkish. You were talking about Turkish. This, again, Dr. Raghuvira has worked on it. He has given a Turkish dharani with Sanskrit and done a comparative study of the Turkish and the Sanskrit dharani and how he has shown the similarities of the two dharanis. Yeah, these are the legal and administrative documents discovered from Silk Road from various places, and all of them are in the collection of British Library. They are working on it. We also have, if you can see the first one, if you go to National Museum, it is displayed. This kind of documents are displayed. You can see. So how they started working on them. They made this printing with blocks, but it came very late. At only around 9th, 10th century, they started printing with blocks, block printing. But earlier, before 10th century, so much was translated and so many copies were made. It is just to think about that, how amazing the work they were doing. How difficult it would have been. For example, when Kumarajiva was translating the text, they used to have around 3,000, 4,000 scholars, Buddhist scholars coming from all over China. The southern, because China at that time was divided into southern and northern, but Buddhism played a great role in the unification of China, because monks were coming from all over China and working with these scholars, especially when I'm talking about Kumarajiva. And when it was not just a translation of one person, okay, you translate and everybody accepts. No. They used to have a bureau, they used to have a number of scholars, and the discussions used to go on, okay, this is the word. For example, dhyana, how it has to be translated, and what is the what should be the exact term in Chinese. It was very difficult for them to find parallel terms in Chinese because that thought was not there. So, initially, the scholars, they were translating verbatim. Even Xuanzang, he has done word-to-word translation. That is why his translations are very important, but they could not be that popular as the Kumarajiva's translations became popular, because he was not doing verbatim translations. He was recreating the text because he was so deep into the Vedic knowledge. He was so deep into the Indian philosophy. His father was from Kashmir. He was a Brahmin from Kashmir, and he was born in Kucha because his mother was a princess of Kucha. So, but even in Kucha, he did not know much Chinese. Only when his fame reached far off lands, far off places in China, then one of the Chinese emperors, he sent a mission to capture him, because he was requesting the king of Kucha to give Kumarajiva to him, but the king of Kucha didn't accept. So finally he sent a mission and he captured Kumarajiva, and in between when he was traveling to there, in between the general who was heading the mission, he declared himself as king of that area, and somehow he didn't know about Kumarajiva. He just knew that Kumarajiva is somebody who is very important for the emperor, and he kept him in prison for 17 years in China. So that was the time when Kumarajiva learned Chinese. Before that, no. I am so surprised when we study the Indians going to China, how difficult it would have been for them to, without knowing the language, without the food that they, even today it's so difficult, now it's becoming easier, but that time it was so difficult to have, there was nothing Indian, no, food was so difficult, and harshness also. Kumarjiva had to face 17 years of imprisonment. And finally, when he reaches Xi'an and all these things I talked earlier. So that time, can you imagine that 3,000 monks who are coming are making copies of the sutras that were translated? Once the translation was final, then they were allowed to make copies by hand. And as soon as their copies were complete, they used to go to their own place, own cities, own towns, villages, and to spread Buddhism. So immediately Buddhism was spread. All the texts that were translated, they could reach to all the areas everywhere in China. It could be popular immediately because of that. So later on, 9th, 10th century, they started making wood blocks, and how they were making prints with these wood blocks. So it became easy. This is Dunhuang. In Dunhuang, still there are a number of Sanskrit inscriptions. One has to study them. When I was in the Dunhuang caves, I could see many, and many of them, Chinese people, sometimes it is difficult for them to decipher, because writing today we call it Nagari, Devanagari, but it starts from Brahmi and it has a long journey of all these years. You can see from Ashokan pillars to, because Ashokan pillars are the earliest written documents discovered in India. From Brahmi to Devanagari, it's a long history of inscription, of writing system. So in India we have many gaps, that how this was there in how this script was written in this period or this period or this. Some periods we do have inscriptions, but for some periods we don't have. For that gap can be filled up by these inscriptions. Because why there are so many types of writing in China? Because people traveling from India had their own way of writing. Everybody has a different handwriting, and people from different areas, they have different styles of writing. Even now you will see that the North Indians write their way, the South Indians write their way. So those differences are very clear in China. So they call it Siddham, because it was coined as a term later on in Japan, because the script that gives Siddhi. So in India there was a tradition that when one starts writing, the first thing that he writes is Siddhi Rastu. May there be Siddhi. May I accomplish this. So Siddhi Rastu became like a mantra. So they in Japan also, in China also, there are manuscripts of written in this calligraphic, beautiful calligraphy. I would like to give one lecture, Professor Sujit, on Sanskrit in Japan. How beautifully do they write? How calligraphy has been, it became an art. We don't have that style of calligraphy in India. We did not develop it like that, but the Japanese have done it. So they called it Siddham.
Chinese have a rich history of calligraphy.
They have, but not that much of Sanskrit. They have. There is another thing that we can do, that Sanskrit inscriptions from China, many of them are, could not survive because of cultural revolution and other reasons. But there are estampages of Sanskrit inscriptions in Taiwan in the Palace Museum collection. What I wish to do is that we should at least bring a photo exhibition to India. We can ask them, and it's not difficult, to request the Palace Museum. I can give you the list of Sanskrit manuscripts, estampages of Sanskrit manuscripts from China. They are very important. And somebody can work on it. It can give many types of clues about our history. So here you can see Dr. Raghuveera. He is working with trying to decipher the Sanskrit inscriptions in the Dunhuang caves with some Chinese. when we talk about the earliest manuscripts and earliest printed document, it's all Sanskrit. They used to write the dharanis beautifully, artistically. So these are two dharanis discovered from China, from Beijing, one of the tombs. This is the earliest printed item of the world. This is the earlier one is a manuscript, and this one is a printed document. It is a translation of Vajrat Shedika Prajna Paramita. Again from Dunhuang caves, Oral Stein brought it. In Dunhuang, there is something very interesting that suddenly a wall fell inside a cave on the side. Suppose this is the cave here. It's a huge cave, and on the side there was sudden, because you don't expect in a cave that there is a wall built. It's actually gouged out. So, but there was a wall that suddenly fell down, and they discovered a huge library from there. I have been to that place. I could see that now the cave, not the library. It's all taken out. There are very important Sanskrit manuscripts discovered from there. This is I talked about the Pomasa, the White Horse Monastery, but that day I didn't bring that photographs from that. So this is this monastery, Pomasa, the White Horse Monastery, has that earliest inscription of 67 AD that talks about two. Now I don't want to say Indian because they were UHs, so exactly they did not go from India, it's now proven. Earlier I used to say Indian monks, Kashyap Matang and Dharm. The names you see, Kashyap Matang and Dharmraksha. They too went there, and because they loaded the Sanskrit manuscripts on white horses, so there are white horses in their memory, and a beautiful monastery was built for them so that they could study and translate the sutras. Again, here you see Dr. Raghuvira and his daughter. So these are the two monks, Kashyap Matang and Dharmraksha. There are sculptures in this monastery, and there are inscriptions also that talk about the history. This is from China, and Ushnish Vijaya Dharani I talked about from Japan also. Ushnish means the turban, but actually the other meaning is supreme. So this Dharani was chanted in all over, I think, East Asia, because there are many documents discovered, as I said, about the Japanese promulgation of the first Japanese constitution, and the manuscript that was taken. It's not clear that whether it was taken from India or it was brought from China to Japan, but whatever, the Sanskrit manuscript of 6th, 7th century is still exists in the collection of the museum adjoining Horyuji Monastery. So this also is the same dharani, and if you try a little bit, this is ma, this is ha, mu, dre, swa, ha. If you try a little bit, you can read na, mo. So the matra jo hai na, that is written like this and this, and otherwise you can see na, it's very clear. See this na, mo, and ma here, ma, ha, mu, dre, swaha. So how they were writing, it's another it should be taken as a research project, collecting all the existing available documents, Sanskrit documents from China, how they were writing, in which century were they writing this way, from which part of India it looks similar, from where the monk was, some famous monk was there, and how his handwriting might have influenced, and all such things. This is, and Ushnish Vijaya Dharani was so popular that they made it they represented it like a goddess. This is goddess Ushnish Vijaya goddess. And another amazing thing is that on the Great Wall of China, the same Dharani, Ushnish Vijaya Dharani is written in 6 scripts, because people were living in this area from different, who were using different scripts. So it was written in around 1333 or something, and it still exists on the Great Wall, but how many people know about it is a big question. People who go to the Great Wall of China to see that, just they see the wall, they don't see the Sanskrit inscription that exists there. So this is what we Indians have to tell them. So I was talking about Kizil caves and talking about the beautiful flying goddesses. Here is one of the paintings of flying goddess from Dunhuang caves. When we sit for puja, what we offer, pushp, dhup, deep, gandh and naivedya. These are the 5 things, and they are called panchopchara. So in China, it is their creation that the goddesses are bringing all these things from heaven to offer to whatever is the Buddha or whatever it is, Amitabha, whatever. So here you can see a goddess flying down from the heaven and bringing a garland. So it's called Malya Devi. There are goddesses of dance, there are goddesses of music, 5 goddesses of dance, 5 goddesses of music. They should all be studied. All these goddesses, although they fill only the upper portion of these walls, they are there in Japan also, in Horyuji Monastery. So beautiful. But unfortunately, the hall in which they were the Japanese artists, once they were making copies to organize a huge exhibition of the mural paintings of Horyuji Monastery, and one of the heating pads was left switched on and it caught fire. And the entire hall was burned, and the next day the Japanese were so sad, and the Minister of Culture had to resign. How can you do that? So there are many interesting stories. You see, China had a great tradition of engraving the sacred texts on stones. Recently, just yesterday, I came back from Vietnam. In Vietnam also, in Hanoi, there I could visit a temple of literature. The temple of literature, what it has, why it is called temple of literature, because Vietnam also has North Vietnam has had so much connection with the Chinese. Although now they don't want. I would like to talk about someday we can talk about how we can work with Vietnam, because Vietnam doesn't want to go with China. So very clear. The conference for which I had gone, it was a huge celebration of celebrating the birthday and the Nirvana day of one of their kings who had established the Thian sect in Vietnam. There were 141 scholars invited from many countries, none from mainland China. There were 5 from Taiwan, but none from mainland China. So they want to do many things with India. They were very happy to know. They were just talking about our president's visit, and they were very happy about it. The 2 presidents of India, they have visited Vietnam, and anyway, we can talk about it later on. So this is one such example that in 7th century, a monk started engraving the Buddhist sutras. I have been to this place. It took so long. He started in 7th century, and it took around 1000 years. Okay, so we wind up. So you can see a Sanskrit letter written there, and how they were doing it secretly, so that these texts can be preserved. They are not destroyed. Even Xuanzang, when he reached back to China, and the emperor offered him many things, then he requested the emperor to build such a place where all that material, that all the sutras that he had taken from India could be protected. It could be protected from fire, it could be protected from thieves or whatever. Complete protection. So this is the monk who started working. And anyway, we just finished this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, please.
I had a small question. You said that the Chinese emperor sent monks on missions to copy the paintings from Indian caves. Which caves and when was this?
Oh, it was Schwense. There was one monk. His name